morning and welcome. We are in Senior English A, and our objective for the hour is to work with Macbeth 4:1. Let's just review where we've been. Macbeth is a play about the acquisition of power, the quest for power. But notice that with each acquisition comes a loss. I would put it in my notes that way. With each acquisition comes a loss. We also obviously have got to play the game that Mr. Keeley was taking us towards at the very beginning of our conversation, and that is who's to blame. The blame game becomes really clear by 4:1. In Macbeth, we've had and seen a great and mighty warrior who allows himself to be tempted into taking the life of the king, then of course the life of two bodyguards, and finally the life and supposed life of his best friend and his best friend's son. In the process of of Macbeth's decline, we can as well watch his wife's, Lady Macbeth's, decline as she begins the process, the long, dark night that will ultimately end an act later in Act 5. Okay, so you might put that in your notes as well. Lady Macbeth, we will see in Act 5, begin her final denouement, end. And it will be tragic. This is, of course, called a tragedy because we look at a great and mighty warrior in Macbeth who begins with great and tremendous power and honor, and by the end of the play, he is nothing more than what he has been called already in Act 3 at the very end, a tyrant. That is to say, a man who cares, as he said about himself. I'm going to go to the witches. I do not care about anyone, he says, other than myself. We use that N-word, narcissism. And now we come back to it. Notice that there's some recapitulation or some repeating of patterns of Shakespeare's play. Notice in 1:1 we begin with witches, right? In 1:3 we begin with witches. We've just finished in the third act with that whole scene with Hecate and those witches that maybe was kind of joined in. Now in 4:1 we'll start with witches again. These witches are going to set the mood. They will talk about how they've been out doing nasties for different kinds of people, creating all kinds of nasties, when onto the stage on page 394 will come Hamlet, and he comes on one side, and Macbeth, on one side, and on the other side are the three witches, and one of the three witches will say, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Put in your notes, what is being suggested? That nasty witches who have been out doing all kinds of nasty things to other people, they say, at least we're not as bad as Macbeth. I mean, what does that tell you? Okay, Macbeth is seen as wicked by wicked witches. Okay, so that's how bad Macbeth is by this point. Why is Macbeth here, by the way? He wants to know the future. This is nothing more than, I want to know the future. Now, why would he care so much about the future? Dude, he's king. I don't understand. It's not so much being king, it's staying king, right? And why is he worried about that? You're right. There was that prophecy that was made to Banquo about you won't be king, but your sons will be kings, which will obviously raise the concern for Macbeth. He will ask the three witches about the future. The three witches then of 4:1 will give three famous prophecies. I want to walk through them with you real quickly so that when we hear them, you'll understand. So you'll want to write these down in your notes as prophecies 1, 2, and 3 of Act 4, Scene 1. Really, technically, there are 4 prophecies, not 3. But we begin with the 3, and then finally we'll get to the 4th. Ironically, the 4th will be the one that Macbeth is most interested in, okay? But first, the very first, what is often referred to in the folio as an apparition or a ghost. Out of a cauldron will come 3 apparitions, okay, as we will look at them. And you will see these starting on page 395 as we see the first apparition on page 395. And this one is often referred to as an armed head. Now, what this simply means is a warrior with a helmet on, okay, a warrior with a helmet on. And the first prophecy will be simply, beware Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife. Now, Macbeth, when he hears this, immediately will say, I knew it. I knew that Macduff guy was somebody I needed to be worried about. I'm going to have him killed. The second prophecy will come, a fairly disturbing scene prop, will come from a bloodied infant. An infant with blood all over it. Again, Shakespeare would have props for this. And the infant will come out of the cauldron, and the infant will say, you don't ever have to be afraid about dying, because no person ever born of a woman can harm you. That's the prophecy. You will never be harmed by anyone born of a woman. Macbeth will take great comfort in this. At first he will say, well, let's let Macduff live. And then he says, well, let's just jack him anyway. Remember, by this point, Macbeth is a serial killer, so he's going to do it anyway, right? Okay? The third prophecy is a strange one. It is a child who comes up out of the cauldron. And he says a very strange prediction that, unless you've kind of studied this play, doesn't make much sense. This is the one place last fall when you watched this play that it was a little confusing for a number of students as I was speaking with them afterwards. If they didn't know this play, they did not understand, first of all, the prophecy, and then later the fulfilling of the prophecy. The prophecy is this: you never have to worry about losing your kingdom. Remember, he's worried about the future, right? You never have to worry about the kingdom until the trees of Birnam Wood march up the hill of Dunsinane. Now, this doesn't mean anything to you unless you know something about the topography of Inverness. By the way, you can still visit this famous castle in Scotland, okay? In Scotland, all over North England and Scotland, they built their castles, and they're pretty amazing structures. I mean, when you visit them today, you're pretty blown away. They've lasted for a long time. But they always built them on hills. Inverness is the castle where Macbeth is, okay? This hill is called Dunsinane Hill, okay? That's the hill that it's built upon. And then there's, at the bottom of the hill, a large forest called Birnam Wood, okay? This forest, we are told, will get up and march up the hill to the castle. And until the trees jump out the ground, you don't have to worry. And immediately Macbeth is like, well, that can never be, obviously, right? He says that can never be. Trees, obviously, don't jump up out of the ground and go marching up hills to castles. So, all right. So he's got his three prophecies for one. And all three of the prophecies, well, let's just say it out loud, they kind of make it look good for Macbeth. I mean, that first prophecy about being aware of Macduff, that was a concern. But the second prophecy of no man born of a woman can harm you, that gave him some comfort. And then this one about the trees marching up the hill, that gives him total comfort. He's like, dude, that will never be. I'm good to go. The witches are ready to leave. They feel like they've done their job. Macbeth is not done. Macbeth came for one real reason. He wants to know about, can I secure my kingdom? And being a king, I need to know about this thing with Banquo. The witches will tell him, don't ask. You don't want to know the answer to this question. Macbeth says, I do want to know the answer to this question. And so the witches will show him the future. Now, this showing of the future thing is done really interestingly. There's a mirror that's held up, and a group of men will walk on stage in kind of like a circle where they go on stage, off stage, on stage, off stage, to show a line or a succession. All of these guys are dressed like kings. And Macbeth will immediately say that they look like Banquo. Okay? They look like they favor Banquo. In other words, what is this portending or predicting? Yeah, Fleance got away, and Fleance is going to grow up to be a king, and then he's going to have kings. And interestingly, the last one that comes on even is double sceptered. Now, what does that mean? Macbeth points this out. He's like, the last king comes on stage double scepter. Now, what is a scepter? Do you remember? Yeah, it's this stupid little stick that kings would hold that give them the right to rule, right? What does it mean if they have double scepters? What does that mean? They don't just rule one kingdom, they rule two kingdoms. Whoa, so they got serious power. And the last one that comes on is double scepter. Now, we should point out in your notes, this is This is a really important political moment for Shakespeare. It's kind of one of the most important moments of Shakespeare's life. Here's why. When Shakespeare begins to write, a woman is sitting on the throne. Her name is Queen Elizabeth, and she is a remarkable queen. She arguably is the greatest ruler in the history of the world. There are people who have made that argument. You can make that argument pretty well. I mean, think about it. At the age of 18, she comes to power and runs the entire known world. And she does a bang-up job of running the world. I mean, she does some pretty remarkable things. One of the first things she does is to require that all of her citizens have at least an 8th grade education, which doesn't sound like a big dog deal until you do the statistics work and you realize nobody in England can read up other than the upper class. It's Elizabeth who figures, and she was right about this, if everybody in England can read, you can disseminate information to them. It's a way to make sure that they're all on the same page with me. So she educates everybody. She does a lot of these kinds of reforms. It's quite a remarkable woman. But there's a problem for Elizabeth. As she gets older, she never marries. She's in fact dies called the Virgin Queen. Whether she actually dies a virgin or not is a subject of huge debate. Most people think she took lovers, but she would never become a wife. The reason is simple. She liked the power she held as queen, but she'd use it all the time. Guys from other countries would come to court her, and she would say, yeah, I think I'll marry you, but first you have to do A, B, and C for me. They would do it on the expectation she would marry, and then she would change her mind, as someone once said a woman is sometimes allowed to do. And she did this game all the way through her tenure. The only problem is she's getting older. As she gets older, she starts to want to look younger. One of the things she does is to take eggshell and stick it to her face. So she puts this white eggshell all over her face because she thinks like the white of the eggshell makes her look younger because it makes her look paler or whiter or whatever. And so this is why when you see pictures of Elizabeth from her later days, portraits, there's lines. You maybe thought that was because it was an old photograph. No, this is because when she talked, she had to talk like this because if she opened her mouth at all or she smiled, it would start to crack. And then they'd stick more of this stuff on, you see, like this kind of thing. Of course, everybody around her had to tell her how beautiful she was or she'd chop off your head. Just ask Sir Walter Raleigh about that. Sooner or later, if you don't go along with Queen Elizabeth, she jacks you. The only problem is, though, remember, how do you become king or queen? Your mama, your daddy had to be king, queen, royalty, right? The problem for Elizabeth is she's getting older. She's not getting married, which means she has no heir. She's got no son, no one to step into the throne. And as she gets really old, she still is not naming anyone to the throne. Obviously, she's no longer capable of having a child and therefore having a direct descendant to the throne. But the question then becomes, who's going to be the next ruler of England? Elizabeth has created this unbelievable empire with all of this tremendous strength, but now she's ready to die. And all around Elizabeth are all kinds of factions that are building up. So that the minute that she dies, she's aware there's going to be civil war in England, where everybody's going to be fighting for power. One of her dying wishes, when she's ready to go, is to name to the throne. Everyone leans into the bed to hear her. She names to the throne James the First, King of Scotland. Now, for those of you that know your Braveheart movie, you already know a little bit about how England and Scotland get along. I'll give you a hint. It ain't pretty. And when she names James the First of Scotland to the throne of England, what a brilliant woman. I mean, I've heard men say women can never be president because they can't run the world the way men can. Queen Elizabeth speaks from the grave and says, au contraire. Even in her dying wish, this woman is genius. She names the one guy everybody in England can hate. And they do. And in that moment, she unites all of England. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. James the First comes to the throne. He kind of looks with disdain on the English people. All of the English people are united. Civil war averted. Smart gal, right? Right to the very end. Queen Elizabeth is a pretty shrewd ruler. James the First has an interest in the theater, as did Queen Elizabeth. He is invited to the first showing of the play Macbeth by a young playwright named Shakespeare. James the First is from Scotland. He was very much into his own history of his family. 5 or 6 generations earlier, James the First had had a really important man in his life in the history books. And that man's name was? Banquo. Right? Now, when Shakespeare writes this play, normal people don't know this. There's in fact only one cat in the audience that knows this, other than Shakespeare himself, and of course it's the King of England. Macbeth or Shakespeare is one smart cookie, right? Of course, after the play, James I has to have a little conversation with Shakespeare about the fact that if you'll think about it, you just finished writing this for this paper of today. Who is the real man of this play? It isn't Macbeth, is it? It isn't Duncan. It isn't even Macduff, really. The real man of the play is, yeah, it is, isn't it, right? Okay, it's Banquo. It's this man who is honorable all the way to the very end of his life, saving his son by sacrificing his own life so that Fleance can go on to become kings. In this moment, James I will witness, ah yes, I am lineage to the greatest man in the whole play. Banquo, that's me, that's my family. He will after this give tribute to Shakespeare, and for the rest of his life, Shakespeare's play company will be called the Chamberlain's Men after James I. He gets the bank that he needs to be able to continue to have the office of writing these plays. So Shakespeare is a smart, a shrewd politician in this moment, okay? And so this is going to be one more element. Of course, bad news for Macbeth. Yeah, Fleance got away, and yeah, he is going to make his way to the throne, which for Macbeth then will just make it that much worse. At the very end of 4-1, Macbeth will make some, I'm on 398. Macbeth will make some observations about those witches. First of all, they all have a tendency to go away right at the moment that he wants to have more conversation, and sure enough, they do. Away they go. Lennox will come onto the stage and Macbeth will ask, did you see the witches? Macbeth at this point is no longer interested in even trying to pretend like he's not affiliated with evil and the witches. They're like, no, the weird sisters, no, can't see any of them. Macbeth says, infected, line 139 on page 398, infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those who trust them. Whoa, what does Macbeth just say? There's dark irony here. Believing in witches and their stupid prophecies will only lead you to be damned. What's Macbeth going to do? Turn around and believe in the prophecies of the witches. Right. We call this, by the way, for your notes, it to be dramatic or on-stage irony. In other words, it's a kind of irony that the audience on some level almost has to laugh at. Dude, are you even listening to the words you're saying? Macbeth says, anyone that believes in witches is a complete and utter fool. I believe in witches. You see how this kind of works. Then off they go, he will ask, was there somebody, a horse galloping by? And Lennox will say, well, yeah, it was Macduff. He's leaving for England. Macduff, of course, remember, is the subject of the first prophecy, right? Beware Macduff. Macbeth will say, fled to England, I, my good lord, and then we will finish with another aside. Take a look at this interesting aside at 4-1. Time, thou anticipates my dread exploits. Can you put it in your own words? What's he say here? This is the Drats line, right? Drats, I wish I could have killed Macduff before he got away to England. The flighty purpose never is o'ertook unless the deed go with it. I should have killed him right when I thought about it. From this moment, this is a pivotal moment in our play. Macbeth has just been given his 4 prophecies. 3 of the 4 obviously give him some comfort. That 4th one troubles him. Look what he now says. It's as if he's going to flip a switch. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. Can you put that in your own words? You are now in 4-1 and you're reading Shakespeare's poetic prose. You ought to be able by this point to begin to put some of this in your own words. From this moment, he says, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. Do you have any sense what that means?
Whatever I think he's gonna.
Whatever I think I want to do, I'm going to do it. Meaning what? What's he not going to do from this point on? I'm not going to think about it. Whatever comes into my brain, I don't like the way somebody looks, wham, I'm going to blow them away. I don't like the fact I didn't get pickles on my burger at Big Mac, wham, I'm going to start blowing people away. I got no interest in thought. I got no interest in logic or reason. I'm simply going to start bunging people. That's it. I'm done. Whoa. I'm not going to think about it anymore. Now, why would he say this? What's the problem with thinking about it? We'll pick this up when we study Hamlet. Why is thinking bad if you are a criminal?
Guilty.
Yeah, if you think about it, you might have a guilty conscience. It's in some ways true that Macbeth maybe here is trying to step away from the notion of guilty conscience. I'm no longer going to have a guilty conscience. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I don't care about what other people think. Whoa, which will lead us now, and even now, which will lead us now to the next thing he's going to do. And it's at this point, most audience members of Shakespeare's day would just go, whoa, 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 dude, you definitely have crossed a line. That whole thing of killing Banquo, crossing a line, no doubt. And Fleance, trying to kill Fleance, that's a major. But there's one thing Macbeth has not yet done that now he says he's going to do. And this is going to label him the worst of bad guys. Even in film today, if you want to make a really, really bad evil guy, villain in a movie, there's one thing that villain can do that will make almost any audience member of today go, whoa, 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 that's bad. What is it? Macbeth's about to say it. Take a look at what he says. And even now, to crown my thoughts with axe, be it thought and done. I'm done. I'm done thinking about it. I'm just going to go do this. What is he going to do? The castle of Macduff I will surprise. Seize up on Fife is the name of the castle. Give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Whoa! He's gonna completely slaughter all of the women and children in an undefended castle. Why is it undefended?
Because he left.
Macduff is left for England, right? So he's going to now send in army guys, and he's going to slaughter Macduff's wife, all of Macduff's kids, and basically anybody else that's along for the ride. Woo! Like I said, even in movies today, if you want to portray a really bad villain will kill women and children, especially completely innocent women and children. It's like Lady Macduff. His wife's going to have any clue what's going on. Keep reading. No boasting like a fool. This deed I'll do before this purpose cool. Right? But no more sights. What does that mean, no more sights? You got any sense what that means? From the very beginning, remember Macbeth suffers with these hallucinations, right? The first one was seeing the bloody dagger, right? The second was hearing the house say Macbeth has killed Sleep. The third was seeing the ghost of Banquo walking around at the party, right? Okay, he doesn't like these sights. Why not? What's wrong with these sights? What is it that it's keeping him from doing? Sleeping. He isn't sleeping. This is a sleep-deprived criminal, right? And he's driving himself nuts. We clearly are watching a mentally psychotic breakdown. And it's happening right on stage, right before our eyes. And then the end of the scene. I want to point out one other thing, though, before we listen to this scene. Just flip your eyes over to 399. And we're going to look at 4-2. In more detail. But look who comes on stage. Right? That's Lady Macduff comes on stage, right? Okay. And, are you ready for this? Her little boy. Her little boy's going to show up in this scene. Right? So, we already know what's about to happen to this poor babe. We know, don't we? Why do we know? Because Shakespeare has Macbeth tell us out loud, this is what I'm about to do. I'm going to go bung that castle. I'm going to kill all the women and children in that castle. Now, why would he do that? I mean, obviously, the answer is psychotic as an answer, but why? Can there be any reason why he would do this as opposed to just going out and killing some other people? Why would he pick on Macduff's castle? That's right. He's worried about Macduff, isn't he? He sees Macduff leaving and going away to England. I'm going to make Macduff pay for his treasonous behavior. Fair is foul and foul is fair. One of the obvious debates of 4-2 is going to be, why would Macduff leave? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We'll obviously get to that later on as we move through this fourth act. All right, here we go. Go back to 4-1. Let's now watch as we and listen.
Thrice the brinded cat hath mewed, thrice and once the hedge
big wine.
Up your cries, 'tis time, 'tis time. Round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails throw. Toad, that under cold stone days and nights has 31 sweltered venom, sleeping god, boil thou first in the charmed pot.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Fillet of a finny snake in the cauldron, boil and bake. Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blindworm's sting, lizard's leg and howlet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth, boil and bubble.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw and gulp of the rabbin, salt sea shark, root of hemlock digged in the dark, liver of blaspheming Jew, gall of goat and slips of yew, slivered in the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger of bat, spangled babe, dish delivered by a drab, make the gruel thick and slab, add that to a tiger's children for the ingredients of our cauldron.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good.
Oh, well done, I commend your pains, and everyone shall share in the games. And now about the cauldron sing, like elves and fairies in a ring, enchanting all that you put in.
By the breaking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks.
How now, you secret black and midnight hags? What is to do?
A deed, without a name.
I conjure you by that which you profess. Howe'er you come to know it, answer me. Though you untie the winds and let them fight against the churches, though the yeasty waves confound and swallow navigation up, though bladed corn be lodged and trees blown down, though castles topple on their warders' heads, though palaces and pyramids do slope their heads to their foundations, though the treasure of nature's Germans tumble all together even till destruction sicken, answer me to what I ask you.
Speak,
Demand, we'll answer.
say if thou'dst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters.
Call 'em, let me see 'em.
Pour in sow's blood that has eaten her 9 farrow, grease that's sweating from the murderer's gibbets, throw into the flame.
Come high or low, thyself and of his death pleasure. So.
Tell me, thou unknown power.
He knows thy thought, hear his speech, but say thou naught.
Beware the same fire. Dismiss me. Enough. Whate'er thou art, for thy good caution, thanks. Thou hast harped my fear aright. But one word more.
He will not be commanded. Here's another, more potent than the first.
Macbeth! Macbeth! Macbeth!
Had I 3 years, I'd hear thee.
Be bloody, bold and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man. For none of woman born shall harm Macbeth.
Then live, Macduff. What need I fear thee? But yet I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. What is this that rises like the issue of a king and wears upon his baby brow the round and top of sovereignty?
Listen, but speak not to it.
Be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him.
That will never be! Who can impress the forest? Bid the tree unfix his earthbound root. Sweet Boldmans, good! Rebellious head, rise never till the wood of Birnam rise, and our high-placed Macbeth shall live the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. Yet my heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me, if your art can tell so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom?
Seek to know no more.
I will be satisfied. Deny me this and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. Why sing that chord? And what noise is this?
Show his eyes.
And grieve his heart.
Come like shadows.
So depart.
Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo. Down! Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs. And thy hair, thou art a gold-bound brow, is like the first. A third is like the former. Filthy hags, why do you show me this? A fourth, start eyes. What? Will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? Another yet? A seventh? I'll see no more! And yet the eighth appears, who bears a glass which shows me many more. And some I see the twofold bowls and treble scepters carry. Horrible sight! Yes, it is true! For the blood-bolted Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. What is this sound?
Aye, sir. All this is so.
But why stands Macbeth thus amazedly? Come, sisters, cheer we up his sprites and show the best of our delights. I'll charm the air to give a sound while you perform your antic round, that this great king may kindly say our duties did his welcome pay.
Where are they? Gone! Let this pernicious hour stand I accursed in the calendar. Come in without there!
What your graces will.
Saw you the weird sisters?
No, my lord.
Came they not by you?
No, indeed, my lord.
Infected with the air whereon they ride, and damned all those that trust them. I did hear the galloping of horse. Who was it came by?
'Tis 2 or 3, my lord, that bring you word Macduff is fled to England.
Fled to England?
Aye, my good lord.
Time, thou anticipatest my dread exploits. The flighty purpose never is o'ertook unless the deed go with it. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done. The castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool. But no more sights. Where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are!
We end 4-1 with Macbeth visiting witches, being told by the witches, yeah, it's true, you're not going to remain king forever, and your son will not be king, but Banquo's kiddo will, Flans. Macbeth will then pivot at the end of 4-1, and will say, I know what I got to do next. It seems quasi-inexplicable. It doesn't make sense. Why would you turn on Macduff? I mean, what's Macduff got to do with this? And of course, the simple answer is, Macbeth is a serial killer. I mean, this is just the way his mind works. Who is potentially against me next? Macduff didn't show up at my party. I'm going to jack him. Oh, I can't jack him. He's run off to... He's run off to England, right? He's run off to England. And because he's left for England, I know what I'll do. I'm going to slaughter everyone in Macduff's house, in his castle. By the way, what's the name of the castle? Fife. Yeah, that's where his castle is. If Macbeth lives in Inverness, at the top of the Dunsinane Hill, then Macduff will live in a different castle named Fife. And so Macbeth's going to send assassins, and he's going to slaughter everybody in the house. Macduff's wife, Macduff's kids, everybody. Anyone associated with that family is going to get murdered. And Macbeth says, I'm going to do it, but I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to do it. End of the scene. Opening of the new scene 4-2. Let's now take a look at it. And let's begin by noticing first right away, who is it that walks on stage? Of course, this is darkly ironic. Because if you'll think about it, one of the major themes of this play is dead men walking, speaking lines. Now, if you'll think about it in philosophic terms, and we'll come to this in the final act of this play with the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy, we're all dead men and women walking, right? You ain't met nobody that's 200 years old, and one or two of us on our drive to school this morning drove right past a cemetery to be reminded that, yeah, you don't make it forever. Everybody's got to go under the ground and become food for maggots and worms, right? As Macbeth will say in Hamlet. That is nothing, for those of us who say that's kind of grotesque, Hamlet or Macbeth, both of these plays will remind us, yeah, this is just the normal trajectory. But within the context of the play, there's been several individuals who are speaking who we knew were going to get jacked later in the play. Right away, we think of Duncan, don't we? Who we recognize every word he speaks is ironic because he knows, or he doesn't know, but we know that he's going to get jacked. So, for example, when he says about Macbeth, wow, what a great relative he is, and we're kind of like, whoa. Or when he says right before he enters Macbeth's castle, this is like the best and most pleasant hotel I could imagine. Yeah, we kind of go, no, not so much. Right? Okay. Lady Macduff will speak lines, and we know here in a few minutes she is going to be murdered. So everything she says carries with it this extra level of irony and weight. Are you ready for this? This scene will be written in comedy. You're expected to laugh in this scene. So Shakespeare's going to play some nasty games with us. Dark irony as we begin. But we don't begin with comedy. We begin with a wife who is deeply unsettled. Are you ready for this? About her man. She will come on the stage with who?
Ross.
And what's significant about that? What's significant about Ross as a character in this play? We've said it before. He's what? He's the messenger, isn't he? He's the messenger. Back and forth he goes. Mr. Frederick is right. Back and forth he goes between characters, usually bringing interesting news. Do you remember in Act 1 what news he brought to Macbeth? He brought to Macbeth the news that the Thane of Cawdor had been caught, and that Macbeth himself would receive the title of Thane of Cawdor. Of course, what can the devil speak true is exactly what Banquo said. Whoa, really? I mean, are you kidding me with this one? That was Ross who brought that intel. If you want, you can also look closely at where Ross is in the scene of Banquo's ghost showing up at the party, if you want to go back and look at that later. Now we've got Ross. Notice onto the stage they come, and Lady Macduff will say, what had he done to make him fly the land? Now, who's the him we're talking about? What's the antecedent of the pronoun him? We're obviously talking about her husband. Notice what theme is introduced right away in the very opening line. It is the theme of flight, absolutely right. Let's jot that one down. We've seen this over and over again, what we'll call the flight theme or the bird theme. Put it in your own words. What is it that she says? Why did he run away? What is she calling into question? Keep going. His courage is what? We just wrote on this one. This is one of the major themes of our play. She's asking whether he's a real what? Man. Whether he's a real man. This is the theme of manhood. Right away, we're only one line into this scene. She says, why, if he's such a man, why did he fly the land. Fly the land means what?
Flee.
He ran off, right? He ran off. Look at the next line. Notice Ross will say, "You must have patience, madam." In other words, what's he say?
Just gotta wait.
Yeah, wait. Just because things aren't always what they appear to be. What lines are we going to use from the very first scene of this very first act of this play? Right. Hover through the fog and filthy air. You don't always know what things are. Ross says, things might not necessarily be what they appear to be. Notice Lady Macduff. He had none what?
Didn't have his head.
He had none what? Patience. Now that's an interesting also theme of this play. The idea of waiting. Remember, Banquo will say when he started thinking about, wow, maybe my sons will be king. Remember he says, hush no more. That's another way to say, I'm not gonna rush these things. I'm gonna let these things happen the way they're supposed to happen. Macbeth, let's say it out loud. Macbeth has shown no patience in this. Notice when Macbeth wanted to show a little patience to his wife, he said, I'm not sure we better kill Duncan. It was Lady Macbeth who kind of shoves him over the cliff. Thanks, Mr. Keeley. Right? And there he goes. And then Macbeth is off running away doing his serial killing thing and all of that. Notice he had none. His flight was madness. Let's point out, this is one of the major themes of the play as well. We've already seen it. Losing your mind or going crazy. That's why these plays, Macbeth and Hamlet, so easily can be studied together, the plays of madness. Shakespeare was clearly very interested in the notion of madness, losing his mind. Here, of course, she says, my husband leaving us unprotected is insane. Of course, let's point out, she is 100% right. How do we know she's right? Yeah, because we know the last lines of the last scene. This is the irony. Lady Macduff is right when she says, Macduff, my husband, left us unprotected, and that was nuts. Later, Macduff will say the same thing. He will say, I screwed it up by leaving them unprotected. Keep going. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. Now, obviously, here's another major theme of the play, the idea of traitors. Remember, the Thane of Cawdor was a traitor. Macbeth became a traitor. He's, in fact, called a traitor, as, of course, the Thane of Cawdor is as well. What is it that she says about her husband?
He's a traitor.
He is a traitor. Why?
Because
He ran away. He left his country. He no longer is in Scotland. He's clearly a traitor. Notice Ross says, you know not whether it was his wisdom or his fear, which he's absolutely right. Lady Macduff, notice, is right, but she's also wrong. The reason why Macduff will leave Scotland and go to England is why? What, he wants to take in the sights and visit London? I don't think so. Why has he left Scotland and gone south to England? Remember, why did Malcolm flee and run down to England? They're trying to protect themselves from assassination attempts, right? So here, notice, Ross is actually correct. We don't know whether it's fear, in other words, he's afraid and so he ran away, or it's wisdom, as in he had to figure out a plan, and the only way to do it is to get down south and try and figure out a plan. We know it's actually the latter. That's why Macduff will leave. Of course, in this scene, we will set up the inevitable coming face-to-face of Macbeth and Macduff. And of course, the groundlings love this kind of thing in the same way that anybody that watches a Jackie Chan film loves that final scene where you always have to have the bad guy go against the hero that Chan will play, right? Where you're going to have that final fight scene, and it's inevitable. We know it's coming. Shakespeare, in many ways, is going to play that game as well in this play. Notice Lady Macduff. Wisdom? She's right about this, by the way. To leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansion and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly. We're back to the theme again. He loves us not. Right? He loves us not. He wants the natural touch. Not only is he not a real man, he doesn't understand how to be a loving man. He left us because he no longer loves us. Keep going. For the poor wren, a small sparrow, the most diminutive of birds, notice we're continuing with this bird theme, right, will fight her young ones in her nest against the owl. Even a small sparrow, mother, will fight against the owl if the owl comes to try and take away her little ones. In other words, my man is no man at all. Macduff is no man. He's a complete wimp. This is the second time in the play we've heard a woman call a man a wimp, right? This is simulating in some ways Lady Macbeth's lines to her husband. Ironically, darkly ironic, we know it's in fact the opposite, and that in fact Macduff is actually a true man. He went away to protect his country, but he left his own family unprotected. We'll ask why in a bit, maybe. What he assumes about Macbeth, that kind of thing. Keep going. All is the fear. Nothing is the love. As little is the wisdom. Where the flight so runs against all reason. Makes absolutely no sense for him to leave. Notice Ross. My dearest cuz, I pray you school yourself. This is his attempt again to say patience. But for your husband, look at this list. This is an interesting list of what it means to be a noble man in Elizabethan England. But for your husband, he is noble. That means he's got good titles. He's wise, judicious. They mean the same thing. And best knows the fits of the seasons. I dare not speak much further. Look what Ross says about what it's like to be in Scotland. But cruel are the times when we are traitors and we do not know ourselves, when we hold rumor from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea, each way and move, hover through the fog and filthy air. He says, it's a terrible time when you're doing the right thing, let's call it fair, and it's considered the wrong thing, let's call it foul. When you do the wrong thing, let's call it foul, and people consider it to be the right thing, let's call it fair. In this play, there is a kind of paradox, a bringing together of opposites, and Ross will say it out loud. We live in a strange time when to be a good guy means you're a bad guy. Give an example of that from the play. To be a good guy means you're a bad guy. Give me one example in this play of being a good guy means you're a bad guy. Clearly we think of Banquo, don't we? In fact, Macbeth said as much. I got to get rid of this guy because he's too good of a guy. Right? He's way too good of a guy. I got to kill him. Right? Think in this play of the ways in which we've seen to be a bad guy presents you as a good guy. Obviously, we think about our lead character, don't we, in Macbeth himself. Macduff will sit right in the middle of all of this. Notice. And Ross will say, don't worry about your man. He's man enough. All right, and he knows what he's doing. But notice Ross then, ironically, will take his leave. I take my leave of you, shall not be long, but I'll be here again. And then the most darkly brutal, ironic lines of the play. Look what Ross says to a woman who's about to have her throat slit. Along with her son, along with everybody else in the castle. Look what Ross says to her to try to comfort her. Read the lines. See them with me? Things at the worst will cease, or else climb upward to where they were before. Put it in your own words. What has she just said? What has he just said to her? He's trying to comfort her, and he says what, Nelson? It can't get any worse. Yeah, Armsbaugh laughs. It's a dark laugh, right? It can't get any worse. I mean, dude, you can't get it any worse than the place we're at right now. And the audience takes a collective gasp and goes, oh, I'm afraid Shakespeare's about to make it way, way worse. But this is the point. No one would imagine, including Ross, no one would imagine what's about to take place on stage. And I told you, rarely does Shakespeare show violence on stage, and we're about to see it perpetrated on the weakest of our characters in the play. The woman who cannot defend herself at all along with her child. And then, of course, onto the stage comes her son, comes her boy. Notice, my pretty cousin, blessing upon you. The child comes onto the stage now. So now we got three on stage. A woman, Lady Macduff, Ross, and then Macduff's young boy. So a young child comes onto the stage. And this is interesting because it's going to mirror the young Fleance who we saw earlier in the play. Notice in this scene now, you're going to have an interesting exchange between a boy and his mama, and this becomes one of the central exchanges of the play once we study the words. Take a look at what happens next. Look at Lady Macduff. She says, fathered he is, yet he is fatherless. Notice the paradox, right? Fair is foul and foul is fair. What does it mean to say fathered he is and yet he's fatherless? What does that mean? He's got a daddy, father, but what? His daddy is gone. That means he doesn't have a father, right? To which, notice, Ross will say, I am so much a fool, should I stay longer, it would be my disgrace and your discomfort. In other words, what does he mean by this? Ross says, I'm so sad that if I stand around here any longer and watch this, I'm going to end up crying. And in the process of crying, prove myself less of a man and therefore make you uncomfortable. I'm going to leave. Of course, ironically, this is exactly what anyone in the audience who knows what's about to happen, and we all do. Why do we all know what's about to happen? Macbeth said as much in the last lines of the last scene. So we know this woman is about to get seriously jacked along with her boy. Ross will say, I can't stand and watch this, it would make me cry. And he leaves, but guess what? The audience gets to sit and watch what happens next. Of course, ironically, and again, this is remarkable. Shakespeare has done this already once before. Before Duncan's body is discovered, you got the Porter scene where you got comic relief. We're now going to get some comedy. We're going to get a mother and her son, are you ready for this? Joking back and forth. But as it happens, it will be profound to a thinking audience as we watch these lines. Watch what happens. Notice, Ross will leave. She will turn to her boy and she will say, bottom of 399, Sarah, your father's dead. And what will you do now? But notice it's not a heavy, like, I need to tell you some information, your father's dead. It's more like, well, daddy's dead, what are you going to do now? Right? So it's very light. Notice what his response is. To continue with the theme, he says, I'll do as birds do, mother. She asks, what, with worms and flies? Is that what you mean? He says, with what I get, I mean, and so do they. Let's point out, this is the words of a child. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. If daddy's dead, I'll just be like a bird and just go out and find another nest. I'm fine. Children always think they're this way, especially if they're well protected, don't they? If a child's well protected, a child has no reason to fear. This will be the dark irony of this scene. The kid's got no clue what's about to happen, as does the mother. No clue what's about to happen, and yet now they're joking. Notice she will call him poor bird, right? Thou never fear the net nor the lime, the pitfall nor the gin. In other words, children have no fear of getting caught and killed, right? Dark irony given what's about to happen. Notice the boy will ask his mother, why should I fear, mother? Poor birds they are not set for. No one wants to kill a small bird, right? I mean, you can't even eat a really small bird. It's like, nobody's going to kill a small bird. Keep reading. My father is not dead for all you're saying. He recognizes she's joking with him. Yeah, daddy ain't dead. I know you're just messing around with me. Lady Macduff will continue the joking. Yes, he is dead. What wilt thou do for a father? Nay, he asks. How will you do for a husband? In other words, hey, it cuts both ways. If I've lost a daddy, you've lost a father, you've lost a husband. So what are you going to do? He throws it back to her. She will continue now to play the game. Line 40. Why, I can buy me 20 at any market. In other words, she's saying, I'm beautiful enough to go out and get another guy. If I need another husband, ain't no big thing to me. So you got some more joking. This is dark. Given what you know is about to happen. This is dark that they're joking about death, right? And of course, let's point it out. One of the major themes of the play is, when shall we three meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won. That is to say, this is a play about death. Everybody's been dying in this play, and now you got joking about dying, right? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll go out and get another husband. It ain't no big thing. Notice, the son will say, then you'll buy him to sell again. In other words, you'll play games with this whole thing of getting husbands and getting rid of them because, Ma, you're so beautiful. You go out and get any guy you want, get rid of him, get another one if you want him too. Notice Lady Macduff will say, thou speakest with all thy wit, and yet in faith with wit enough for thee. In other words, you're sharp. She finds out you're a pretty sharp little kid. You can keep up with adult-like bantering, in other words. Notice the son. Now he's ready to get a little more serious. He heard before a word. You know how children are always eavesdropping, right? He heard a word. The son will ask, was my father a traitor, mother? She will, it's almost, and I've seen this done where she's like folding clothes. So it's almost like she's not even paying attention now. And she will just respond quickly, aye, that he was. Typical child, though. He hears the word. Now he wants to know what the word means. He asks his mom, well, what is a traitor? Well, now let's pause for a moment and make sure we know it before we hear. What is a traitor? You promise one thing, and then you break that promise to do something completely opposite. We think obviously of Macbeth as the classic example of a traitor. He will say to the Duncan king, "Oh, I'm so happy you're in my house, I'm going to take care of you." But taking care of you means putting, 2 knives in your body and then jacking the 2 bodyguards you brought with you as well. Wow. Notice the son will say, "Was my father a traitor? I was." What is a traitor? She will say it basically the same way that Frederick just said it. Why, one that swears and lies. Now the word here, swears, does not mean curse word swears. The word swears here means put your hand on a Bible in a courtroom and promise. And lying, obviously, is to break that promise. In other words, are you ready for this? A traitor is anyone who makes a promise and then breaks it. To that degree, she says, "Your daddy is a traitor." Notice the son will continue. "And be all traitors that promise and then break their promise?" Everyone who does that is a traitor. You can kind of tell Mama's getting a little bit tired of son's questions. Everyone that does so is a traitor and must be hanged. That's the rules. If you're a traitor, you're hanged. We know this from the play because the Thane of Cawdor in 1-3, remember? Right? We were told this in 1-3, the traitor is going to be hanged, right? Remember that one. Okay. Everyone. The son asks an intriguing question. Who must hang them? Who's going to hang all these traitors? Lady Macduff. She's speaking with a child. Well, of course. Bad guys are killed by the good guys. The honest men. Now the son will make an observation at line 54-55. Which becomes one of the most provocative of this entire play, and I argue, one of the most provocative single lines in all of Shakespeare. Shakespeare loves to save some of his most important lines for his fools and his children. Happens all the time in plays. Study King Lear, look at the lines of the fool. Study Hamlet, look at the lines of the old fart fool Polonius. Here, we've got a young child, and this child is going to say something that's quite remarkable. And as we hear him say it, we'll at first kind of laugh. And then we'll go, whoa, whoa, whoa. This kid just summarized this entire play. And in the process, makes me question my own ideas about the world. Take a look at what he says. Now to set it up one more time. So if you promise stuff and then you break your promise and lie about it, that's called being a traitor. You got it. And what do they do to traitors? They're hanged. And who hangs them? The honest guys, the guys who don't break their promises. The kid now will make an interesting observation. In the history of the world, are there more people who promise things and break their promise? Or are there more people who are straight up honest all the time and always do everything they promise? See, I mean, any high school senior can say, yeah, that mathematics is easily balanced heavier on one side than the other. What? There are more honest people in the world or more bad people in the world? The kid is smart enough to realize in the history of the world, there are way more Macbeths than there are Duncans. There are way more Macbeths than there are Banquos. Look what he says. Well, then the liars and the swearers are fools. For there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang up them. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What did you just read? What's he say?
It's the opposite way around.
He says, this is dumb. Why, if there's a whole lot more bad guys in the world than good guys, why don't all the bad guys in the world just get together, kill all the good guys, and they can run the world?
Good choice.
But wait a minute. That's this play. That's this play. We're watching on stage that very thing happen. Right? Duncan was a good guy or bad guy? Clearly a good guy. We know so. Macbeth said as much. He said, when he dies, the angels will meet his soul outside of heaven's gates and blast on trumpets. That's how good a guy Duncan is. And yet, Macbeth jacks him. What about Banquo? Good guy or bad guy? Clearly a really good guy. What's Macbeth have to do? Gotta jack him. Over and over again in this play, the bad guys are the ones who kill the good guys and take over. This kid says that should be the history of the world. Notice how we want to believe good guys win over bad guys. I mentioned a Jackie Chan film intentionally. Notice in all of his films, good guys always in the end get the bad guy. It's not like at the end of the movie, the bad guy pulls out a .45, blows away the Jackie Chan character, walks away, and we roll credits. Nobody's coming to that show, right? Nobody's coming to that show. Why? Because we want to believe, dare we say it? We want to believe in a kind of mythology that says, in the end, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. Are you ready for this? Shakespeare himself wants to believe that. Which is why at the end of this play, when Macbeth and Macduff come face to fight, there's no question as to who's going to win. We already get it. And yet the kid has said something interesting in the real world. It's the bad guys who ought to get together, kill all the good guys, and then they could just run the world. They don't have to be afraid of anybody hanging them. Woo. The mother can't get it. Notice she says, now God help thee, poor monkey, but what wilt thou do for a father? She's back to it again. He says, if he were dead, my father, you'd weep for him. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father. In other words, he says, I can read. I know what's going on here. Dad ain't really dead, or you'd be in a whole different frame of mind. Notice Lady Macduff will say, poor prattler, how thou talkest. And we go, yeah, he's talking, but he has just said something remarkably profound. And then onto the stage will come a messenger who will say, you need to quickly get out of here. Onto the stage will come the assassins. They will have a comment. Notice as they come onto the stage, Lady Macduff will say at line on page 401 at line 6970, I can't fly. I got nowhere to go. She says, I'm trapped. I've done no harm, but I remember how I am in this earthly world where to do harm is awfully laudable. Wow, there it is, right? Fair is foul, and foul is fair. To do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, do I put up that womanly defense to say I have done no harm? Just because she says I'm innocent and I've done no harm doesn't excuse me from the fact that I'm about to get jacked. In the history of the world, mostly innocent people are the ones that get killed. And they're killed by wicked people, mean people, bad people. Notice the murderers will come on and ask, where's your husband? She knows exactly where her husband is. Notice what she says, though. I hope in no place so unsanctified as where thou mayest find him. She protects her man. She will not say where it is that he is. What is interesting about the fact that the assassins ask where her husband is? They assume what about what's going on in the castle? It's fairly clear. Right. Macbeth has told them, get to the castle and kill Macduff and kill everybody else. In other words, it's Macbeth who knows that Macduff has fled. He won't tell the assassins. Why doesn't he tell the assassins that Macduff is not there? Right. He wants these assassins to kill everybody. The easy way to do that is to say, start with Macduff. If they don't tell you where he is, start killing people. Woo. Notice what the traitor will say about Macduff. Interestingly, he's a traitor. Which is, of course, what she said earlier. Notice it's the boy who steps up and says, thou liest, thou shag-eared villain. What is a shag-ear? Shakespeare, what does a shag-ear mean? You're close. It's a dog. He calls the guy a dog. What's interesting about calling an assassin a dog? Where in this play earlier did we hear comments about dogs? Right. Remember, Macbeth is talking to the very assassins when he says, are you a poodle or are you a pit bull? There's a difference there. Both of them are dogs. Yeah, you call yourself a man. Both a poodle and a pit bull are dogs, though. Which kind of a dog are you? Notice here the kid calls him a dog. Notice the murderer will call him an egg, and then a young fry, a bird, of treachery, and then he'll stab him. The boy is the one killed. On stage, the boy will take a knife to the gut, right? And he will say it out loud, he's killed me, mother. And then it will be the son. Notice the reversal here. We don't have Banquo saving fleance by fly, fleance, fly. Here, notice it's the boy who will say, run away, I pray you, and then you have a tendency to want to turn the page.
But then it's scene 3.
Oh my goodness.
But wait, I can do you one better. Listen carefully. I saw this performed once on stage. Brutal scene. Done well, it goes from sadness, my guy has left me, to joking, what will you do for a husband? What are you going to do for a father? That kind of thing. to, well, you know, that's a pretty stupid rule. Why don't all the bad guys just get together and slaughter all the good guys? They could run the world, just take over the world. There's a whole lot more bad guys than there are good guys in the world. That doesn't make any sense. Ha ha, you're such a kid, dumb kid. Onto the stage comes these murderers, and then they will kill the boy. And all of that we watched. But then the woman, the character who plays the Lady Macduff, she is drug off stage. You don't see what happens to her. Shakespeare, notice, didn't write that she's going to be murdered. And she will scream, this character, this actress, screams out quite loud for a few seconds. And it just kind of reverberates through the theater. It's a profound way to end this scene when you realize it's a tragic, tragic way to end this scene.
What has he done to make him fly the land?
Must have patience, madam.
He had none. His flight was madness. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors.
You know not whether it was his wisdom or his fear.
Wisdom? To leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansion and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly? He loves us not. He wants the natural touch. For the poor wren, the most diminutive of birds, will fight her young ones in her nest against the owl. All is the fear and nothing is the love. As little is the wisdom where the flight so runs against all reason.
My dearest coz, I pray you school yourself. But for your husband, he is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. I dare not speak much further. But cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves, when we hold rumour from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea each way and move. I take my leave of you. Shall not be long, but I'll be here again. Things at the worst will cease, or else climb upward to what they were before. My pretty cousin, blessing upon you.
Fathered he is, and yet he's fatherless.
I am so much a fool. Should I stay longer, it would be my disgrace and your discomfort. I take my leave at once.
Sirrah, your father's dead. And what will you do now? How will you live?
As birds do, Mother.
What? With worms and flies?
With what I get, I mean. And so do they.
Poor bird. Thou'dst never fear the net, nor line, the pitfall, nor the gin.
Why should I, Mother? Poor birds they're not set for. My father is not dead, for all your sake.
Yes, he is dead. How wilt thou do for a father?
Nay, how will you do for a husband?
Why, I can buy me 20 at any market.
Then you'll buy 'em to sell again.
Thou speakst with all thy wit, and yet i' faith with wit enough for thee.
Was my father a traitor, Mother?
Aye, that he was.
What is a traitor?
Why, one that swears and lies.
And be all traitors that do so?
Everyone that does so is a traitor, and must be hanged.
And must they all be hanged that swear and lie?
Everyone.
Who must hang them?
Why, the honest men.
Then the liars and swearers are fools. For there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang up them.
Now, God help thee, poor monkey. But how wilt thou do for a father?
If he were dead, you'd weep for him. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father.
Poor prattler, how thou talkst.
Bless you, fair dame. I am not to you known, though in your state of honour I am perfect. I doubt some danger does approach you nearly. If you will take a homely man's advice, be not found here. Hence with your little ones. To fright you thus, methinks I am too savage. To do worse to you were fell cruelty, which is too nigh your person. Heaven preserve you, I dare abide no longer.
Whither should I fly? I have done no harm. But I remember now. I am in this earthly world, where to do harm is often laudable, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, do I put up that womanly defence to say I have done no harm? What are these faces?
Where is your husband?
I hope in no place so unsanctified where such as thou mayst find him.
He's a traitor.
Thou liest, thou shaggy villain!
What, you egg?
Cry of treachery! He has killed me, Mother. Run away, I pray you.
Murder.
Now we turn to Act 4, Scene 3. Macduff has just lost his wife, he just doesn't know it. Now we're not interested in Macduff's wife, though. We are interested in Macduff himself and where he is, England, and who he's with. Malcolm. Now, who is Malcolm? Last time we saw Malcolm, when did we see him? His father had just gotten bunged, huh? And you'll remember that his brother and he, who's his brother? Donald Bain. Donald Bain and Malcolm both look at each other and say, whoa, 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 it's early morning. Daddy just got jacked badly. We got to get out of Dodge. We separate. One goes to Ireland, that's Donald Bain. One goes to, write it in your notes, why is Macduff in England? Now this is an interesting question. Why is Macduff in England? What is the point of Macduff leaving Scotland? We know that there's serious problems with him doing this from the last scene, huh? He left his wife and children. That was a bad play, right? But why has he done it? I mean, what, is he down there looking to buy property or something so he can like leave Scotland and move down to England? Maybe he's looking for a little bit of property on the Dover Beach area, you know, that kind of... No. He's left Scotland and gone to England. Why? He is interested in returning to Scotland with the King of Duncan. Why? We're going to have civil war, aren't we? Yes. That is to say, Macduff does not believe Macbeth the worthy heir to the throne. He doesn't believe he's been a good king. He's going to displace him. Now, will he displace him by asking Macbeth, would you please step down from the throne? That ain't going to work. We know enough about Macbeth to know that ain't going to work. So in other words, we're going to have some violent action, right? Fair or foul, violent action. Normally, it's a violent action is going to be foul, right? It's going to be there. Somebody's got to die, right? To gain the betterment of Scotland. Fair or foul? Fair. Right? So Macduff is showing up to ask Malcolm, hey, let's go back and let's go to war. Question for your notes. And initially, sometimes seniors have to play through this one intellectually, and then they go, oh yeah. Why might Malcolm be a little bit worried about Macduff showing up? Who is Macduff? Who is he in relationship to Macbeth? He's number 2 in the kingdom, right? Now that Banquo's gone, Macduff's the top general in all of Scotland. Why might Malcolm be a little bit worried Macduff shows up? He might be assuming, right, Macbeth has sent this guy to kill me. Malcolm has a difficult proposition that will play nicely with Malcolm's daddy's, Duncan's, observation in Act 1. There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. What does that mean? You cannot tell, remember this is pure Machiavelli, you cannot tell what somebody really feels by looking at that somebody's what? Face. You can't tell, can you? You don't know. Malcolm's got a problem. Macduff has shown up in England and he said, hey, let's go back. I'm on your side. Let's go back and fight against Macbeth, and we'll get you the throne. But Macduff, or Malcolm, let's put it in our notes this way. Malcolm learned something from Daddy that makes him a little better leader than Daddy. Malcolm realizes there is an art to find the mind's construction in the face. There is a way. There is a test. There's any number of tests. Let's say it this way. It's fairly evident by virtue of the old Thane of Cawdor and then the new Thane of Cawdor, Macbeth, that Duncan was a little too trusting. You hearing me here? A little too trusting. He's the freshman that shows up at the University of Wyoming and goes to the first party and says, hey, sure, whatever you guys tell me to do, that's what because that's what we do in our freshmen. You're telling me I trust you, right? How many young ladies on campuses in the universities will often report, but he was really good looking and he seemed so nice. You know, and you read a play like Macbeth and you're like, are you completely stupid? Of course he was really good looking and of course he seemed really nice so he could do what he did. Really? That's really? That's Malcolm's view. Really? You're really here to help me? I got to test you. The way he tests Macbeth or Macduff is fascinating. The way he tests Macduff is to say the following. Macduff says, listen, we need you to come back to Scotland and be king. And Macduff said, or Malcolm says to Macduff, you know, I don't think I'd be a very good king. I don't think I'd be a very good king. Macduff's like, what are you talking about? Of course you'd be a good king. No, I don't think so. Here's why. I'm probably going to go back to Scotland, and every single young girl I can find, I'm going to sleep with her. I'm going to rape all the young girls in all of Scotland, because that's just the way I am. That's the kind of guy I am. Macduff kind of looks at him and says, dude, we have a lot of girls in Scotland. That's what he says. We got a lot of girls in Scotland. Malcolm's not done. He goes, oh no, you don't understand. I'm very greedy. And I like to take people's stuff. And when I go back to Scotland, I'm going to take all of the rich people's property for my own. Because I want a lot of property. Macduff will say, ooh, that's a little bit worse than the girl thing. We got property, but people don't like parting with their property. I don't know. And then Malcolm says it one more time, but you don't understand. I'm even worse than that. I'm going to kill whoever I want. I'm going to make Macbeth look like a good leader. And Macduff will say, oh, I guess I was wrong. I'm sorry, my bad. And it's at that point, when he turns around to leave, that Malcolm goes, hey, just kidding, just kidding. I was just testing you to see if you were for reals. Fascinating. In other words, he pretends to lie, to be foul, so he can find out if Macduff is fair. And in the process, it works. Onto the stage will come Ross. He's unrecognizable at first. He's been traveling a long distance. The last time we saw Ross was when? Last scene, right? Last scene. Remember, it was Ross who told Lady Macduff, really, things can't get any worse. They got to get better. Dark irony. It can't get any worse. What worse could happen than what's already happened? Shakespeare has an answer to that, and it's a dark answer, right? Ross comes on stage. Immediately, Malcolm will say to Ross, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to come back to Scotland together, me and Macduff. We're going to take care of business. We've already got the army ready to go. It's at that point that Ross will then confide to Macduff, yeah, I got bad news. Your castle has been attacked. Your wife, and he will say it this way, all of your pretty babes, dead. It will be at this point that Macduff has to come to a nasty realization. He will say it out loud. They died for thee. He's talking to himself. They died for thee. In other words, Macduff takes personal responsibility. He does in Elizabethan England what would show on the stage that you were really upset. He takes his hat and he pulls it down over his face and his ears. Part of this is so he can weep without being seen. Right? He's wanting to not look like a crybaby, but obviously he's weeping. Malcolm, who starts the scene by saying, let's go find a tree and sit under it and cry our eyes out because Scotland's so sad. And Macduff starts the scene by saying, no way, let's get swords and go fight against this tyrant. Now the roles reverse. Macduff is ready to sit down under a tree and cry for obvious and right reasons. And it's Malcolm who will say, yeah, hey, don't be too sad about this. Use this as the whetstone. He uses an interesting word picture. It's like a sword, and the way you would sharpen a sword is on a stone that you would whet. He says, use this to sharpen your anger. And at the end of this scene, and at the end of the fourth act, you will have a Macduff praying to God to say, bring me face to face with this tyrant, and I will jack him. And of course, if you'll think about it, these are all of the Jackie Chan films you know. Before you have the major meeting, before Jackie Chan and the bad guy, you have to have a moment that precedes that, right? When it looks as if it's going to go the other direction, right? And everything's going to go south, and it's all going to be bad. And of course, the audience then, for Shakespeare, is ready to see the fifth act and go, hurrah, our hero, as Macduff is going to march against Scotland. And we know inevitably we're going to have this meeting, right? Now, there's one part of this scene I left out. And it's an interesting one, and it's one oftentimes misunderstood. In the middle of the conversation between Malcolm and Macduff early on in 4-3, a doctor comes onto the stage. a doctor. Now this is important because we're going to meet a doctor several more times in this play. Onto the stage he comes, and the doctor talks about how great it is to be a doctor in England. How come? Well, he says, we have this amazing king down here. He is so unbelievable that he walks through the hospitals, and when his shadow hits sick people, they get well. That's how unbelievably powerful and good our king is. Of course, the observation is, when Macbeth's shadow touches you, what? Right. We have an interesting kind of dichotomy. Wait. Who's sitting in the audience of the first performance of this play? Who just happens to be related to Banquo 5 generations earlier? King James liked to believe that he also had this power, that people could touch him and they would begin to feel healthier, better. Right? Okay. This notion that he had special power from God to heal people and the like. James himself had a little bit of that, kind of conceit. And so Shakespeare's clearly playing a game here. Throughout this entire scene, though, I want you to keep in the back of your mind the question we began with. What constitutes a great leader? Will Malcolm be a better leader than Macbeth? And if so, and if you answer yes, you have to answer yes on reasons. Machiavelli might say, no, he will not. Machiavelli might say, in fact, Macbeth is a great leader in one regards. He knows how to take care of his business and gain power. He did gain power. The problem maybe Machiavelli will say is Macbeth is a little bit imbalanced to keep at it. He should have been a little bit better prepared for the violence that was necessary to hold power. On the other hand, you might say, Plato seems to probably be better on board here, and Machiavelli probably has missed the boat on this count. In the end, a parent can only threaten so long. And then the kid, especially as the kid gets older, ultimately can say, you know what? Fine, I'll go find someplace else to live. You're going to throw down on me like this. Especially, for example, if you show up to the parent's house at 12:30 and you try to explain to the parent, I had a situation that I had to resolve and I couldn't be back here at time. And the parent says, I don't care, you're gone. And you say, but there's no logic to that. You're not even going to hear what I got to say? I'm not. I had a rule, you broke the rule, you're done. See what I'm saying? Plato would say, you got to have some intelligence in the application of your rules. It's clear Malcolm has learned something, even as a young man, about what it takes to be a leader. And one of the foundational rules is you don't trust everybody who comes up to you and says, hey, I'm on your side, pal. You're not gullible, right? You have to kind of be more judicious. What does that word mean? Judicious means wise. Wise. All right, here we go. We'll listen now to 4-3.
Let us seek out some desolate shade, and there weep our sad bosoms empty.
Let us rather hold fast the mortal sword, and like good men bestride our downfall and birthdom. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven on the face, that it resounds as if it felt with Scotland, and yelled out like syllable of dolour.
What I believe, I'll wail. What no, believe. And what I can redress, as I shall find the time to friend, I will. What you have spoke, it may be so, perchance. This tyrant whose sole name blisters our tongues was once thought honest. You have loved him well. He hath not touched you yet. I am young, but something you may discern of him through me, and wisdom to offer up a weak, poor, innocent lamb to appease an angry god.
I am not treacherous.
But Macbeth is. A good and virtuous nature may recoil in an imperial charge, but I shall crave your pardon. That which you are, my thoughts cannot transpose. Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell. Though all things foul would wear the brows of grace, yet grace must still look so.
I have lost my hopes.
Perchance even there where I did find my doubts. Why in that rawness left you wife and child? Those precious motives, those strong knots of love, without leave taking. I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonors, but mine own safeties. You may be rightly just, whatever I shall think.
Bleed, bleed, poor country. Great tyranny, lay thou thy bases sure, for goodness dare not check thee. Wear thou thy wrongs, the title is afeard. Fare thee well, lord. I would not be the villain that thou think'st, for the whole space that's in the tyrant's grasp, and the rich east to boot.
Be not offended. I speak not as in absolute fear of you. I think our country sinks beneath the yoke, It weeps, it bleeds, and each new day a gash is added to her wounds. I think, withal, there would be hands uplifted in my right. And here from gracious England have I offer of goodly thousands. But for all this, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head or wear it on my sword, yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before, more suffer, and more sundry ways than ever by him that shall succeed.
What should he be?
It is myself, I mean, in whom I know all the particulars of vice so grafted that when they shall be opened, black Macbeth will seem as pure as snow, and the poor state esteem him as a lamb, being compared with my confineless harms.
Not in the legions of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth.
I grant him bloody, luxurious, avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name. But there's no bottom, none, in my voluptuousness. Your wives, your daughters, your matrons, and your maids could not fill up the cistern of my lust, and my desire all continent impediments would o'erbear that did oppose my will. Better Macbeth than such an one to reign.
Boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. It hath been the untimely emptying of the happy throne and fall of many kings. But fear not yet to take upon you what is yours. You may convey your pleasures in a spacious plenty, and yet seem cold the time you may so hoodwink. We have willing dames enough. There cannot be that vulture in you to devour so many as will to greatness dedicate themselves, finding it so inclined.
With this there grows in my most ill-composed affection such a staunchless avarice, that were I king, I should cut off the nobles for their lands, desire his jewels and this other's house, and my more having would be as a source to make me hunger more, that I should forge quarrels unjust against the good and loyal, destroying them for wealth.
This avarice sticks deeper, grows with more pernicious root than summer seeming lust, and it hath been the sword of our slain kings. Yet do not fear. Scotland hath foisons to fill up your will of your mere own. All these are portable with other graces weighed.
But I have none. The king becoming graces as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, fortitude. I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each several crime, acting in many ways. Nay, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity on earth.
Oh, Scotland, Scotland.
If such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken.
Fit to govern? No, not to live. O nation miserable, with an untitled tyrant, bloody sceptred, when shalt thou see thy wholesome days again? Since that the truest issue of thy throne by his own interdiction stands accused and does blaspheme his breed. Thy royal father was a most sainted king. The queen that bore thee, oftener upon her knees than on her feet, died every day she lived. Fare thee well. These evils thou repeatest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. Oh, my breast, thy hope ends here.
Macduff, this noble passion, child of integrity, hath from my soul wiped the black scruples, reconciled my thoughts to thy good truth and honor. Devilish Macbeth by many of these trains hath sought to win me into his power, and modest wisdom plucks me from overcredulous haste. But God above deal between thee and me. For even now I put myself to thy direction, and unspeak mine own detraction. Here abjure the taints and blames I laid upon myself, for strangers to my nature. I am yet unknown to woman, never was forsworn, scarcely have coveted what was mine own, at no time broke my faith, would not betray the devil to his fellow, and delight no less in truth than life. My first false speaking was this upon myself. What I am truly is thine and my poor country's to command. Whither indeed, before thy here approach, old Seward with 10,000 warlike men already at a point was setting forth. Now we'll together, and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Why are you silent?
Such welcome and unwelcome things at once, 'tis hard to reconcile.
Well, more anon.
Comes the king forth, I pray you?
Aye, sir, there are a crew of wretched souls that stay his cure. Their malady convinces the great assay of art, but at his touch, such sanctity hath heaven given his hand, they presently amend.
I thank you, doctor.
What's the disease he means?
'Tis called the evil. A most miraculous work in this good king, which often since my here remain in England I have seen him do. How he solicits heaven himself best knows. But strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery, he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks, put on with holy prayers. And 'tis spoken, to the succeeding royalty he leaves the healing benediction. With this strange virtue, he hath a heavenly gift of prophecy, and sundry blessings hang about his throne, that speak him full of grace.
See who comes here.
My countryman, but yet I know him not.
My ever-gentle cousin, welcome hither.
I know him now. Good God, betimes remove the means that makes us strangers.
Sir, amen.
Stand Scotland where it did.
Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself. It cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rent the air are made, not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. The dead man's knell is there scarce asked for who, and good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps, dying or ere they sicken.
Oh, relation too nice, and yet too true.
What's the newest grief?
That of an hour's age doth hiss the speaker. Each minute teems a new one.
How does my wife?
Why, well.
And all my children?
Well, too.
The tyrant has not battered at their peace.
No, they were well at peace when I did leave them.
Be not a niggard of your speech. How goes it?
When I came hither to transport the tidings which I have heavily borne, there ran a rumour of many worthy fellows that were out, which was to my belief witnessed the rather for that I saw the tyrant's power afoot. Now is the time of help. Your eye in Scotland would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their dire distresses.
Be it their comfort, we are coming thither. Gracious England hath lent us good seaward and 10,000 men, an older and a better soldier, none that Christendom gives out.
Would I could answer this comfort with the like. But I have words that would be howled out in the desert air where hearing should not latch them.
What concern they? The general cause, or is it a fee grief due to some single breast?
No mind that's honest, but in it shares some woe, though the main part pertains to you alone.
If it be mine, keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it.
Let not your ears despise my tongue forever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard.
I guess I did.
Your castle is surprised. Your wife and babes savagely slaughtered. To relate the manner whereon the quarry of these murthered deer to had the death of you.
Merciful heavens! What man? Ne'er pull your hat upon your brows. Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'erfraught heart and bids it break.
My children, too.
Wife, children, servants, all that could be found.
And I must be from thence. My wife killed too.
I have said.
Be comforted. Let's make us medicines of our great revenge to cure this deadly grief.
He has no children! All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, how kite! Oh! What, all my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop?
Dispute it like a man.
I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things that were most precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee, not that I am. Not for their own demerits, but for mine fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now.
Be this the whetstone of your sword. Let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart, enrage it.
Oh, I could play the woman with mine eyes, and braggart with my tongue. But gentle heavens, cut short all intermission. Front to front bring now this fiend of Scotland and myself.
within my sword's length set him. If he escape, heaven forgive him too.
This tune goes manly. Come, go we to the king. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. Macbeth is ripe for shaking, and the powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long that never finds the day.
In other words, things are going to get better. Before you put up your notes, pay close attention. Some of you will say, did he mean to do this, Shakespeare? Notice what Macduff says, the word picture that he uses for the death of his wife and children. Did you see it? What's the word picture? Quite literally, what is the word picture? The picture of a hawk coming in, swooping down in one fell swoop, snatching them all up and flying away. What theme are we talking about there? Clearly that flight theme, that bird theme, right? We've seen it over and over again in this play. Notice what Malcolm says. This tune goes, what's the word he used? Manly, right. We're back to the theme of manhood as well. Shakespeare wanting to drive home the point. Thank you. I will see you back tomorrow.